Hello, welcome back. This is Chicago Reacts. My name is Lauren, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I asked several months ago at this point for people to start sending me some cool cryptid stories, creepypastas. There were a few people who sent me some different things that I hadn't heard of before that did make me go down into little rabbit holes to try and find out more. So today, because it's thematic for the time of year, I wanted to talk about the Jingle Man. The Jingle Man was interesting to me because he doesn't operate in the same way that a lot of other cryptids do. First, I thought he was going to be a little bit more like Krampus, but he really isn't. Everything that I have seen so far, all of the creepypastas that have mentioned him, and there are a few, and then even when I looked into it even further to find out maybe where some of these creepypastas took their inspiration from, he doesn't seem to hurt people directly in the way that a lot of other monsters do. Instead, he gets into your head and twists everything around and just kind of counts on good old Catholic guilt to really do you in. And again, this is just in like the little bit of research that I've done, but I wanted to explain it to you and see if anybody has heard of this guy or if anybody else has gone further down the rabbit hole than I have. So, without further ado, let's talk about the creepypasta Confession of the Bells. This one did have some moments where it really freaked me out, and the Jingle Man isn't actually explicitly mentioned in this, but there is good reason to believe that he was the ultimate culprit. So basically, it starts out with this woman. She has to go to her cousin's wedding alone because her husband is going to have to work. She starts out really annoyed about that just in general. Which makes sense because, they probably agreed that they were going to this thing together a while ago and now suddenly he's not around. Anyway, she gets completely blackout at the wedding. So she wakes up the next morning completely naked in a strange bed, alone, and she gets a text message that is a picture of her doing the dirty with a stranger. And it just really sends her into a spiral, which I feel so bad for her, the girl in the story. She was assaulted. She was assaulted and then blackmailed, essentially, and then she starts to hear the ringing of the bells. And in other stories, we hear that what the Jingle Man does is he takes your own guilt and just exacerbates it, and you start hearing the ringing of his bells, and the guiltier you are until that you do something about it. So she starts to hear the bells. She goes home. She is panicked and devastated. She's really upset. Her husband is acting like there's nothing wrong, and she just can't really seem to connect with reality right now. Everything is just the bells, the bells, the bells. Later that night, my husband must have known something was wrong. He had to know something. But he didn't talk about it. When he tried to kiss me, I pulled away. He yelled after me, but I left. He didn't follow. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered the house that night. My sin would not let me sleep. A constant jingle and chime of bells echoed in my head. I walked into the parlor and I saw my husband standing there with his back to me. I said his name and he turned around. His eyes were torn out and his mouth was full of blood. I screamed, but all I could hear were the bells. He fell on top of me and he held me there on the floor. Then his bleeding mouth opened and I saw his throat rip apart, and the clawed hands of a demon climbed out of my husband. I saw a living skeleton pull itself out of his flesh, and it saw me with its eyeless face. It held my mouth open with its claws and vomited blood and filth and tiny metal sleigh bells into me. The bells don't really go away. She starts feeling really sick, and she ends up taking a pregnancy test, which comes back positive. Now, this obviously sends her into a new spiral of just sheer panic and desperation. and she decides to end the pregnancy. She has a lot more dreams that I really don't want to go into right here because they're horrible. A lot of assault. It's very violent, honestly. And my heart aches for anyone who's had to go through something like that, because people do end up feeling guilty for something that they really didn't have any control over. Someone took advantage of this woman in a very vulnerable state and then have just made her hate herself over it. And again, the bells don't stop. She's finding it difficult to even talk to her family because she's worried that they saw her at the wedding with this stranger and she has no idea what happened. She doesn't remember if she was flirting with him. She doesn't remember anything. So she can't talk to anyone about this. It's just her and her guilt and the jingling of bells in her ears. And then she gets a video from the same number that had sent her the initial photo. And this video has just even more proof that she had sex with this strange man. And it basically just, it's what convinces her to go to the appointment and terminate the pregnancy at all. So she goes. It's a terrifying experience for her. And while she's under the anesthetic, she has another dream. And this time, that living skeleton who she saw come out of her husband, this time the doctor cuts it out of her. And when she wakes up, the bells are gone. She goes home. No one's there. She's still feeling pretty lost. She tries to pray, and the rosary beads just shatter everywhere. So I feel like that's a metaphor. I feel like it's a metaphor that the rosary beads shatter when she's like trying to pray. Her husband comes home that night, and it's eerily reminiscent to her nightmare. He's standing with his back to her. She calls his name. When he turns around, it's not that his eyes are gone, but they're deadly blank. And apparently someone at work has shared the video of her with the man who assaulted her. It's been uploaded to an amateur porn site. And that's when things really, really kick off. I walked into our parlor. I saw him standing there with his back to me. I can remember thinking it was just like my nightmares. I said his name and he turned, stared blankly at me. I looked back at him and I could feel the tears flood into my eyes. He asked me how I could do this to him. I didn't know what to say. Then my husband started shouting. He demanded that I say something. I cried and shook my head, and he grabbed me. He swore at me and shook me, telling me to say something, to explain why I did it. I'd never seen him so angry before. And then he started choking me. I couldn't breathe. I pulled away and he followed. He grabbed me again and hit me. I stopped and looked at him. For a moment, I thought it was all over. Then he cursed and grabbed me again. My husband threw me into the wall. I could feel him getting closer. He reached out to grab me again. I ripped the Virgin Mother statue off the pedestal and swung it at his head. He fell to the floor. Blood gushed from his head and pooled under him. At this point, she panics again and kind of comes back to herself. She's realizing exactly what she has just done, even though she never blames him for what he just did. She holds him, and as his blood soaks into her clothes, into her hair, into her hands, she starts to hear the bells again. She runs out of the house, screaming for help, begging. No one wants to help, or at least it seems to her that no one wants to help her. She ends up at the Church of Our Lady of Mercy. Again, begging for help. She's not really hearing anything. People are approaching her, asking her what she wants, what she needs, what just happened. And again, all she can hear is the jingling of the bells. She runs to the statue of St. Peter, and she's just so lost in this sound that she can't silence. She runs to the statue of St. Peter and somehow manages to grab the keys that the statue was holding in his hand, and remove them from the statue. She then takes them and just stabs them into her own ears, at which point things finally went silent. And there the story ends. I failed to say that at the beginning of the story, she wakes up in the hospital with her head all swathed in bandages, and she is currently strapped to the bed. And something about this story just feels so viscerally real in a way that a lot of creepypastas don't. And I don't mean like the fantastical elements of it, but it does convey the idea of like victim blaming and hating yourself for things outside of your control, and it conveys the idea of things just spiraling really, really well. And it just is an interesting story of isolation when surrounded by people, and just what guilt can drive you to do. And the Jingle Man isn't mentioned in this story. The narrator doesn't talk about anybody else causing this to her. She has the dreams about weird demons. She hears the sounds, doesn't connect it or research or try to figure anything else out. She doesn't have to. In other stories that I found, this is the Jingle Man's MO. Now, the narrator of this did survive, which doesn't usually happen. The idea usually is that he gets into your head and twists all your thoughts around and pulls your guilt and your sins to the forefront until you end your own life. In the creepypasta that is the grandma's story of the Jingle Man, she basically threatens the kids with, hey, if you're bad, he will come and he will make you rip yourselves inside out. Which is just a great thought. Thanks, Grandma. There are a lot of other fun, like, monsters at Christmas stories, though, so we don't need to go too deep into that. But there are other older tales of the Jingle Man, or rather, people mentioning bells in relation to a crime that they have recently committed. There was one tale of a woman in this old little German town in like the 1630s, and she was found with a bloody knife and the bodies of her daughters on the floor, and then she ran to the church and just started slamming her head against the church steps, her last words being, "He's in the bells." Just, people hearing little ancient old stories. And, again, I'm not sure if that's a real tale or if it's an urban legend or like an old-timey, like, ghost story that you tell at Christmas. Again, like the grandma story, be careful or he'll get you. He'll get into your head, and anything you've done wrong, he'll twist it until you can't handle it anymore. There's another story that basically tells people that hold your kids close around the fires. Don't be alone. Be aware. The sadness of creeping guilt is what is said multiple times throughout the little poem. Because the creeping guilt in these cold winter months when we're all alone, it just takes root and it grows. This poem also says that the hungry fiend is banished if blood be spilt. Now, mostly that seems to, in other stories, mean people die. In the original story that I just read, she doesn't die, but there's a lot of blood spilt, and she kills her husband, so maybe that's enough to silence this monster. It's unclear, but again, it just does feel like maybe the isolation is part of it, keeping people away from a support system that they can trust. And, in ancient times, the winters were just very dangerous, and they were cold and they were lonely. And especially if you live in some kind of rural area where no one's really around, then you definitely want to keep your family close. And just, humans are social creatures. We need people. We need our love. We need support. We need all of that around us at all times. And I feel like going into this Christmas season, just to try to keep that in mind, I suppose. Like, what's important? What's really important to you? And, like, how can you grow your support system? And, is there something that you do feel incredibly guilty about? And then take a step back and figure out, should I feel guilty about this? And if you do, figure out something you can do about it. Not because the Jingle Man is coming for you, but it will, like, make you feel lighter. It will lighten your load in a way that I feel like we could all use right now. Just a little bit of love, a little bit of light. And I really wasn't expecting to get any of that out of a Jingle Man creepypasta, but there you have it. Stranger Things, am I right? Now, of course, there is people who I've seen. I recently saw TikTok. Someone thinks they see the Jingle Man. I mean, I don't see anything, but I guess I don't have anything that I'm particularly guilty about. Maybe. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. So I thought I'd try and do something new because, again, I couldn't find too much about it. So I figured I would just maybe make my own thing. And I tried. Call it an experiment. We'll see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.